Welcome to the Leap Health Workplace Podcast. Here we explore innovative, proven health and wellbeing solutions to drive your performance and productivity. Leap Health empowers individuals and organisations to prioritise their health and wellbeing as a catalyst to performance and productivity. We do this by providing workplace health and wellbeing performance workshops and also the Leap 360 one-to-one leadership coaching to drive health, wellbeing and performance, powered by the Game Changer Index Energy Flow Impact Profiling Tool. And we offer bespoke corporate programs to ignite proactivity in ownership at all levels of health and wellbeing as a catalyst to performance and productivity. Whether you're sat at your desk right now or on the move, get ready to listen, get ready to invest your time and take action straight after. I'm Anna Reddy. Let's get ready to make small steps to leap health. Welcome to the podcast today, and we're going to be focusing today all around men's health. I'm delighted to welcome Emmett Kilduff, who is a former Wall Street investment banker. He was with Morgan Stanley and also a serial entrepreneur. A personal health scare in 2022 was a catalyst for him wanting to change his focus and getting more out of life, which I think lots of us experience these life changes and enable us to have a bit of a change in our direction to mean that we can get more out of life in terms of the things that really matter to us. He really wants to focus on his personal growth. And this led to the creation of Pitstop, which is an app that's helped him develop his own personal growth and wants millions of other men to benefit from it as well. And actually, men's health right now is really underrepresented. We have a big focus around women's health, particularly around the menopause, but men don't seem to be getting the attention that women are in terms of their health. And although there's more reported cases of women's mental health, actually 36% of referrals to NHS for psychological conditions are men. And when we look at some stats around men taking time off work, what is really interesting and sparked my attention was actually 52% of men wouldn't feel comfortable taking time out of work for feeling like they're struggling. When actually we're talking a lot more about mental health, but there's still that block there. So I'm delighted and really, excited to welcome Emmett to the show today, who's going to shed a lot more light on this and give us a lot more curious questions to think about when it comes to mental health. So welcome to the podcast today, Emmett.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
Lovely to have you here. So is there anything I've missed in that bit of an introduction there?
No, that was a nice comprehensive intro. Yeah, look forward to getting stuck in.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more then, Emmett. You mentioned about your health scare. I know we discussed it a little bit, but tell our listeners a bit more about what's made you change your approach to life and giving you new perspectives in life.
Yeah, I think looking back, it was sort of frustrating that it did take a health scare to sort of shake me and create some urgency into wanting to make better priorities and have this pursuit of a growth mindset and seeking balance in life. But it was a health scare that really jolted me into action. I had a heart procedure in May 22, and when I woke up in the cardiovascular ward of the hospital, I looked around me, and the average age of the people there were typically men aged in their 70s, more overweight. I was in pretty good shape, and at age 45 at the time, and I just went, I shouldn't be here. I was 30 years below the average age. I should not be here. And that was sort of a key moment for me. It led me to read a book, a little bit morbid, but it was a book called The Top Regrets of the Dying, Top 5 Regrets of the Dying, written by an Australian palliative care nurse. And she'd interviewed hundreds of men and women before they died and asked them, what were the regrets? What would they change if they could go back in time? And, you hear some interesting things like, we worked too hard, didn't prioritize what you really want to do. You're sort of doing things that others might think you should do, not spending enough time with friends and family and so on. And sort of you come out of hospital, you read this and you're all a little bit more, but you go like, crikey, like this, life is not a dress rehearsal. We have there's a book called 4,000 Weeks. That's typically on average how long we have. Right, let's get cracking. What do I want to get out of it? And that was the start of the Pitstop journey in May 22. And I'm delighted, weirdly, I'm delighted that I had the health scare, because otherwise I might not have commenced this journey. So here we are.
Amazing. Sometimes those things that happen in life create that urgency, which create your motivation to make a change. And it can, always seem like a terrible at the time, but actually, the stage you've got to now, you're really seeing what's actually come out of that and what you've been able to achieve. So there's a couple of points then that I picked up on. It was only yesterday I was with a group of people talking about, what if you could do a pre-mortem on your life? So, we do a post-mortem, don't we? But if we could do a pre-mortem and try to predict what are those health mistakes we might be making along the way, rather than getting to the end of your life and thinking, what were those health mistakes I made? And I guess this is what you're talking about a little bit more, is being more proactive and taking ownership for your health. And as you said, feeling like you were the youngest person on that ward and feeling like you shouldn't be there. In our world right now, chronic diseases are starting to emerge earlier and earlier. I work a lot in the field of diabetes, and type 2 diabetes is starting earlier and earlier, and children are developing type 2 diabetes. It just shows that in the world that we're in now, we've got to be even more proactive in our health, and make those steps of early intervention. That really sounds like what you've been doing, and particularly what you're doing at Pitstop as well.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, please go ahead.
No, go on. You go.
Oh, yeah, healthcare is obviously a big part of life, and I think the healthcare system is not working in the right way. It's reactive instead of preventative or preemptive. So we all take medicine or pills to react to something, and in some cases that can be too late. And so there's an increasing movement of preventative care, to your point, including this concept of having a longevity doctor instead of a traditional GP who just gives you tablets and prescriptions. You're absolutely right. There's things that one can do in life to delay inevitable death. There's a great phrase. There's two phrases. Everyone's heard of the concept of a lifespan. So, in the UK, typically for a man, the average lifespan is 73, 74. But that's not the most important stat to me. The most important stat is called health span. So what's the typical age that men and women live to in a healthy way, as opposed to being, having to rely on others and not being in a great shape? And unfortunately, in the UK, the stat is pretty horrific. It's just 63. That's not a big number. So how can one maximize your health span? One of the key ways is absolutely through trying to think about healthcare preventative ways, learning from things like the blue zones, which are 5 areas around the world where people live the longest, learning how they live their lives. I'm not saying that you have to be perfect and only eat vegetables for the rest of your life, but there are just some simple learnings that one can take in order to maximize health span and be around for the grandchildren and all those wonderful things that can come in later life.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? Because all those, looking at that blue zones, there's nothing complicated, is there? There's nothing super expensive. It's just this simple way of living, which is really enabling them to have that longevity, the simple things such as connection and eating unprocessed food and movement, which are very cheap and very easy to do. But it's just remembering those basic things that we need to do. So I said in my introduction that society was maybe failing men. There's a lot more focus on women's health, and women feel more open and comfortable to speak about the health. We're all under lots of massive pressure in our lives, from social media and expectations of other people. Tell us a little bit more how this has frustrated you and brought you to where you are with Pitstop.
Well, I mean, like, firstly, I'd like to say to your listeners that I think society is failing both men and women. It's not just failing men. Society has failed women for centuries. Um, and I do feel in the last maybe sort of 10 years or so, it's failing men in the sense that, um, like the term femtech is a coined phrase, meaning female technology companies. It's a category. There are lots of femtech companies around the world. The equivalent term for men doesn't really exist. It hasn't been coined yet, whether that's male tech or men tech, whatever phrase one might like to use. And within that, there are very, very, very few startups dedicated to men's technology or men's well-being. Pitstop is in that category. We are a male tech company. Um, but like social media, to your point, like the world, we're all expected to be perfect. And it's getting dangerous with social media, particularly for younger people. I deleted my Instagram account actually just last week. I'm just sick of scrolling. It's not bringing me any advantages. But so many people are scrolling and looking at people with six packs, no mental health issues, seemingly perfect, have loads of time for leisure, relationships, are top of the ladder in their career and making a ton of money. That's just not the truth, right? That's very few people score 10 out of 10 across all those things. And so there's this false perception being created by society. And that puts pressure on us all to sort of live up to that, um, without society giving us the support structures to do so. I'm frustrated that in my school, my college, even with a great employer like Morgan Stanley, I never got really any support in terms of like how to think about getting the most out of life, or how to get balance out of life, how to optimize for nutrition, or what is preventative care. I only heard of the concept of preventative care really about 2 years ago. And so I like society, government, employers are not really set up today to support us. So where does that leave us? It leaves us on our own. And the problem with men, to your point, Anna, is like men on their own do not discuss things with other men, or sometimes even other women, even if partners. Women are great at discussing sensitive and non-sensitive topics with their friends and family. We men are useless at that, and there's a huge stigma. A lot of men live with masks on, and so how do we advance? How do men advance in that context? It's tough, and I'm sort of talking my own bat here, but that's the context which Pitstop is genuinely trying to step into. Um, it's the Pitstop framework has helped me, and we want to help millions of other men around the world. Effectively become better men by trying to have a growth mindset and trying to have balance and think about improving across multi aspects of life.
Brilliant. And sounds like you've really found that niche that is needed for us to all have a growth mindset, because if men have got that growth mindset, then that impacts on women as well. It has a ripple effect. You mentioned men don't feel comfortable to talk. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to put a pin on it, but I think if you look at like what our dads, or certainly granddads, the way they were brought up, maybe after World War II, like men were just supposed to be these sort of tough characters who had little feelings and just went to work and came home, got the monthly wage in, and um were quite stoic in nature. And I'm Irish, as you can detect from my accent. Like in Ireland, generally, even still, if someone asks how you are, the typical answer is I'm grand. But you can't be grand every day. None of us are, right? And so, but there's this sort of macho aspect, fear of men being vulnerable, and frankly, stigma and men living with masks on. I think it's changing, and um, I like there are at least 20 examples I can think of in the last few years where famous male celebrities have openly discussed their sort of mental health issues and life issues. And I think that's superb, because it humanizes it, and it makes other men think that it's there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable. Um, And I'm trying to live with a masks off. I'll give you two examples. I have a therapist. I'm very happy to say I have a therapist. I see no issue with that. I also was low in testosterone and have solved for that. I knew nothing about testosterone 2 years ago. I didn't know what levels I should have or should not have, and I figured that out. And so we need to discuss these things more. We have a client at Pitstop who is in his 50s, lives in the States, and because of Pitstop went and got tested for testosterone, is now on testosterone, and he says it's totally changed his life. He's publicly said that on LinkedIn just yesterday. And that's wonderful. That's a shot in the arm for me and the Pitstop team that we're trying to make a difference. And that's just one example. So yeah, it's frustrating. I think it's changing. I think men with growth mindsets are hopefully more open to discussing these things with their friends and family. We've created a form in the app to help men communicate, and you can be anonymous if you want to be, but at least you're communicating, you're giving your thoughts and views. I'm attributed. You can see my name on the app, and all my comments are there, and I'm trying to encourage other men to be visible and transparent. But look, it'll take time, and we're not going to solve it overnight. Yeah.
You're quite right. It does take time. It takes time to, break those barriers down, doesn't it? But I guess when we look at maybe what it was like 10 years ago, 20 years ago, we have made huge progress, but just that reaffirms the need to keep making that progress forward. And you picked up there on that vulnerability. And just by sharing something, a tiny little bit about yourself, opens up conversations for other people and helps them as well. And like you said, we've had a lot of noise around the menopause, but not as much around testosterone for men. I do predict this will be the next noise-driven topic that will be addressed. But by you being able to share that, you could have changed the lives in other men as well, because they've then thought, yeah, actually, this is me that needs to be taking testosterone, that might be deficient in it. So I'm just going to take a step back now. I'm intrigued to know more about what was well-being like when you were a Wall Street investor. So tell me, let's go back. So how long ago was it when you worked there?
I started working for an investment banking in Canary Wharf, London, back in May 2000.
Okay, so really, really like high performing and cutthroat states, busy environment. Tell me a bit about what well-being interventions were in place there, and what were you expected in your job?
My goodness, this could be a short answer, Anna. I was doing 80, 90-hour weeks. There was very little, if any, well-being. The well-being from the company was if you worked after 9, they'd buy you dinner in the canteen, and they'd also pay for a car home. But of course, you're starting work at sort of 7 or 8 in the morning, and you're working till 9 in the evening, or maybe a little bit longer. And therefore, there's not much time for well-being in between. There was a good gym in the office, in fairness, in the offices that I worked in. But there was no, there was no, now, obviously, I'm sure, as you've got, people that are dedicated to promoting wellness, and there's committees, promoted to creating wellness and well-being of the employees. There was none of that back in, it's nearly 25 years ago. And so I looked awful. I smoked at the time, and I worked my derriere off, and I wasn't healthy. After 3 years, I took a 3-month sabbatical to go to a fitness camp in Kenya, run by a lovely English lady, and sort of reboot. That was my sort of MOT, because I worked so hard and didn't have any focus on well-being.
Yeah. So I guess for people listening now, that's just a quick reminder as to how it was maybe 20 years ago. And you can see how far we've come as to where we are today. So there's still lots more we can do. But actually, in an industry where you're expected to perform at really high levels, back then, there just wasn't the connection between performance and well-being. And just working all those hours doesn't necessarily mean that you're achieving as much as if you could do in a smaller space of time if you've invested in replenishing your energy stores. I think that's probably what you're doing as well with Pitstop, is just encouraging people to be at their best, but by focusing on their energy and the mental and the physical health as well. Now, you've mentioned growth mindset a few times. Emmett, tell us a bit more about what do you mean by growth mindset?
Yeah, it was a term phrased by an American lady several years ago, and it's a term that's about always being curious, always experimenting, never standing still, avoiding the status quo. So always be learning. You've heard of the term of lifelong learners. I like that term. And going back to the blue zones, you know, those types of people are always trying to sort of continue to learn and keep their mind active. There's some stats to show that people that play, you know, chess or bridge in later life, because they keep their mind active, you know, that helps their longevity. But for me, it's about trying to educate myself on interesting new topics, trying to learn from experts. But you could read every book in the Oxford Library or the Cambridge Library, and so what? So you have to turn knowledge into action, otherwise it's meaningless. So people with growth mindset are action orientated in my view, or that's certainly my definition of it. So a quick example, a friend of mine, his dad is a sprinter. He has always been a sprinter. He's now in the 70s and still sprints. And a simple stat from him that I learned is, if your dehydration declines, your brain capacity could go down by 40%. Like, that's staggering, right? You talk about performance at work. We need to learn. The work needs to learn from the performance centers, a lot of sports teams around the world who are clearly, you know, pushing the boundaries of innovation. So if your brain is working at a sort of 60% capacity instead of 100% capacity, then, you know, you're not going to be competitive. You're not going to be at your best. So I wake up every day and I just assume I'm dehydrated now. I constantly assume I'm dehydrated, and so I take a lot of salt, good salt. I sprinkle it into water regularly, because hydration is not just about drinking water; it's about salt and electrolytes. So get some good salt in a box and have it in your kitchen. Sprinkle it into water regularly. That'll give you much better hydration. And that's just one, you know, sort of simple example of what you can do to be constantly learning and adapting.
Great top tip there. Your salts in your water in the morning, make it a habit. If you do it same time every day, then throughout the day, just make things a habit so that you're doing that constantly. And it's just small things, isn't it, like that we sometimes forget in a busy world, but can have a huge impact. And yeah, I love around how you say, you know, you can constantly be learning, and, you know, our brain can develop and develop and develop. It doesn't matter what age, we can still have that neuroplasticity going on, and there's so many things that can stimulate that, as you said, from that growth mindset, learning new things, but even exercise as well stimulates those neurochemicals in your brain, which have that neuroplasticity effect as well, particularly your hippocampus, which is all around your learning and memory preservation. You know, it's really important to look after that. So in terms of the growth mindset, I'm going to go a bit deeper with this and understand. So, you know, this is all about learning new things, challenging yourself a little bit more, which we all need to challenge ourselves to feel purposeful and impactful in life. And that can really help our mental health if we're, you know, keeping challenging ourselves. But how do we know what is the right balance? How do we know when we're getting that growth mindset at the right level?
Yeah, like, I mean, I'm not saying I'm trying to, you know, read a book a day, and you know, there's some times when I just like to chill out on the couch as well, right? I mean, it's not about, you can't be at in fifth gear, so to speak, every hour of the day. You got to come back into fourth, third, second gear, just like every Formula One car takes a pit stop, right? You got to recalibrate. I think when I think about balance, and I think about something life coaches have been using for decades called the wheel of life. And so if I asked you or any of your listeners to draw a circle and for them to say what are the components of your life, most people would include health, mindset, leisure, relationships, career, finance. And to your question about balance, then my suggestion would be to ask people to score where you are today along each of those six components and where you'd like to be, and maybe in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and then just focus on one. You know, the PhDs in behavioral science rightly say that one can't improve, six areas of one's life at a single time. So pick one for November 2024, which starts tomorrow. Pick one topic that you want to improve on. So let's just say, for example, it's mindset. My suggestion then would be to go and absorb as much content as you can and educate yourself. That could be reading a book summary, listen to a podcast, or even being bold enough to ask your friends what do they do to improve their mindset. And then maybe take 2 or 3 learnings and say, right, for this month, I'm going to try and actually integrate those 2 or 3 learnings into my habits, into my daily flow, so that by the end of the month, hopefully they do become real habits. Or maybe I don't like all 3. Maybe I like 2 and I want to keep, ditch one. But so that by the end of the month, if you've scored mindset 6 out of 10 today, hopefully you might be at 6.5 or 7 out of 10 by the end of November. Like that to me is a growth mindset. You've figured out one area you want to focus on. You've attacked it. You've chatted about it. You've figured out what works for you, and you've taken a step forward. You've improved your overall score in life on the wheel of life. And then for December, you can think about something else.
I think that really makes sense, doesn't it? Doing things in small stages, because we know the stats around at New Year's resolutions, how, not many people stick to them, do they? People have these grand ideas that they're going to be a totally different person and they're going to be, rocking and winning at everything in life. But actually people don't stick to them because they're just too challenging. They're not realistic. But the way you're describing the growth mindset is just by doing things step by step and building upon those, create the foundations of those habits and then build on them as well, because we want them to be for the longevity. Like we talk about the blue zones, these are things that they've done every day for years and years and years, which is creating that longevity and that legacy of results. So you, going back to your health scare in 2022 and you changing your habits and the things that you've done, what's enabled you to get to where you are now? What are the steps that you've changed in your life that have enabled you to feel happier and healthier today?
These like as some examples of things I've started to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's take the first category, the wheel of life, health. One of the things I've done is I've, on the recommendation of my longevity doctor, I bought a weighted vest. Really simple. You go to Amazon, for £100, you can buy a weighted vest. And then when you're walking or doing light running, you wear the weighted vest, so you don't waste a good walk. And you burn a lot of calories by having a 10 kg weighted vest on. That's really simple. My longevity doctor does it. So once he told me he did it, I was there. I'm competitive. I'm eager. If you're doing it, I'm doing it. Another example with on health is I started probably about 2 years ago using AG1, which is a sort of an all-in-one vitamins, minerals powder form every morning. So that's the first thing I do, along with taking salted water. I have AG1. I also in the water put in olive oil, which is really good for you, a dash of olive oil, and some other things. On mindset, on the second part of the wheel of life, Anna, I searched for and found a therapist. That was big for me. I'd never thought about therapy. It's probably more common in the States than it is in Europe. And I guess like most men before that, I thought that therapy was a sign of weakness. I now see it as a sign of strength. I've learned a lot about me, how I think, cause and effect, and it's great to bounce things off another person who I respect and can learn from. Um, so that's mindset. On leisure, um, what have I done in the last 2 years that's different there? I try to well, COVID has helped, I guess. So I balance, I sort of work half the day from home, half the day in the office, and that means I have more time, with kids, and certainly in the mornings. Um, and there's some on the relationship side, which is the fourth place of the wheel. Like, there's a terrible stat, which is 63% of fathers say they spend too little time with their kids. That's awful, isn't it? And that's something that I'm trying to address as much as I can. I do work hard, but I try to have a balance. And if it's not scheduled, it doesn't get done. That's a good phrase I've learned over the last 2 years. There's no point having lots of to-do lists, like spend more time with kids, unless it's so much more powerful if it's scheduled. So Saturday morning, 9 to 9:30 or whatever it may be, or 9 to 10, bring kid to football, scheduled, or bring kid to bowling, or whatever it might be, actually get it in the diary. We spend so much time thinking about our diary during the work week. What about our calendar weekend? Certainly for me, used to be just empty, but now I'm trying to actually use the time to greater effect. On the career side, um, what's changed? Well, Pitstop is another string to my bow. On the career side, I have two other businesses as well. I don't need any more businesses. My challenge there is to manage the three companies, and I've learned from productivity experts that one trick is to, in the morning, for my first 3 or 4 hours, I don't speak to anybody. So I do what's called deep work, and I split it into Pomodoros, 25-minute blocks, which are proven to be more successful than just trying to work for 4 hours straight. So I do 6 or 8 Pomodoros on specific tasks, my most important tasks. And then after that, I can check emails and, have calls in the afternoon. But that's been really helpful for productivity. And finance is, we talk about mental health issues and so on, but actually finance is the number one stress factor for men. By and large, or certainly historically, we're supposed to be the breadwinner and bring all the money home. But with inflation and all the pressures of life, it's harder and harder to survive financially. And that is one of the key factors that drives or causes mental health issues, I would have thought. And if people jump straight to mental health issues, but cause and effect, I think mental health issues come from an imbalance across the 6 parts of the wheel of life that we've been discussing. So come back a level, it's important to try and have balance in life, which might help prevent you from having a mental health issue down the line. Finance is tough though for all of us. Like, we're all under pressure. Cost of everything from an egg to bread in the supermarket is rising. Thankfully, interest rates are starting to come down, and that's obviously outside of my control. But there's various things you can do through reading interesting books about how to manage personal finances, to how to do investments, and figure out what works for you. So that's a quick drive around the wheel of life, so to speak.
Thank you. Some super top tips there. And as Emmett was talking through that, I'd maybe just challenge you to think about your wheel of life and where you're up to in each of those stages. But yeah, that finance one's interesting, isn't it? Because I know years ago I would have never ever been interested in looking at pensions, attending a pensions webinar. That would have been an email that I'd deleted in my inbox. But the older you get, the more you think you have to pay attention to these things. But actually, you should be paying attention to them early, because being proactive and starting earlier yields greater return on investment in all those areas that you've discussed. I've noted down a weighted vest. I only saw someone out running one the other day, and I thought, do you know what? I've never ever tried that. So yes, that's on my list of things to do. And you've mentioned the therapist twice. Want to pick up on this, because for years and years we've thought that you go to see therapists when you're at rock bottom, and you use them, after you're really, really suffering with your mental health. Whereas, in other countries, in other areas of the world, it's just normal to have, you know, it's just common to have a therapist, isn't it? And you use it as a preventative measure, because the greatest thing you can learn about, you know, the most important thing you can learn about is ourselves. Until we know ourselves as deep and as well as we possibly can, then we can't be the best version of ourselves. We can't be as productive as we want to be in our life, so that we can achieve everything that we want to achieve. So try to think of that therapist or counsellor in a different light, in terms of, this is preventative, this is just part of my life, rather than this is someone that I turn to when I'm at rock bottom. And many organisations as well do have EAP that people just don't tap into. And obviously Pitstop have got lots and lots of resources around supporting your mental health as well. Just another couple of questions, Emma, before we go. So you mentioned as well, men struggle to talk. And if you say, you know, how are you today? In Ireland, they'd say, I'm grand. In Burnley, they'd say, I'm all right. How can we get more how can we use more meaningful questions for people to feel comfortable to open up those conversations? What would be your suggestions to rephrase that? Are you all right?
Well, yeah, like, a great question. I don't think there's any silver bullet, but I some thoughts that come to mind. I think, especially for really good friends, if that friend says I'm all right or I'm grand, dig a little deeper, because it's so easy to just to accept, and we all have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We have as much responsibility to listen to our friends and family as much as, like, be the first person to step forward and talk about sensitive or insensitive topics. So it's important to say, I'm willing to listen, or I'm here to help, buddy. How's the relationship? How's work really going? So I think dig a little deeper. And I have started to do that, and it's actually quite liberating when you get past this silly mental hurdle of stigma and masks on. Because I mean, I've been asking some of my best friends recently some more honest, real questions that I never would have done, because men just, like, say, I'm grand. I go to the pub and watch, a big football game or rugby game or whatever it is, and sort of just have the crack, have fun, which is great. But if they're genuine friends and you really care for them, you should be asking more questions, and you should be, or at least offering to listen. But it doesn't always have to be about mental health issues. It could be something like, I asked our kids a few months ago on holidays, how could we become better parents, my wife and I? And you might sort of say, here's some of the examples that my kids said. Have you asked your kids similar questions? Just to sort of get a conversation about parenting. Which is an interesting topic. Like, no one really teaches us how to be good mums or dads. Isn't that ridiculous? It's the most important job in the world, but you don't really get taught how to do it. So I think there's some low-hanging fruit there to help, certainly men, through Pitstop, and become better parents.
It is absolutely a very, very tricky job that we're all trying to do the best job we can, but it's not always easy. But no, thank you. It's some real good nuggets there, to dig deep and just to ask those questions and building up that trust with people. You're then in a position, really invest in building up those relationships, because then you're in a position to maybe say, I've observed this, I've noticed that you've behaved in X, Y, and Z way. Are you all right? Because that's not how you normally are. And being able to know that person and have those open, honest conversations can be really helpful. And as you said as well, just listening sometimes is all people need. Sometimes we're very solution focused and think we have to solve everything for people. Sometimes they just need to talk. You just need to be there to listen. So try not to overcomplicate it. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. So this is my last question. I think you said you got boys, didn't you, Emmett? Did you tell me that you'd got children, boys?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I have two boys and one girl. Yes, Anna. Yeah.
Yes, I remember correctly. Right, what would your advice be to your boys in terms of managing their mental health, and what would your hope be for them in the next 10 years as to how they can prioritize their health? Two
Wow.
questions in one.
Yeah. Great question. Well, I think the first thing I'd say is my older boy who's now 16 has heard of Andrew Tate, and that really, really frustrates me. That's not the type of influencers or experts I want him listening to, or frankly, any teenager around the world listening to. Um, we need an authentic men, vulnerable, authentic, real men educating the men of tomorrow. What advice would I give to my kids? I would I guess the word authentic comes up again. I would say to Dylan, his name was Dylan, he's 16. I would say, um, please feel free to ask me anything about my life, and I'll try and be as open and transparent with you in terms of. And I don't think it's just mental health. I would broaden it again, and I'd say, like, how can I how it's about looking at life holistically. What could he do? What could he do to sort of become the best version of himself, or to be, to keep having a growth mindset? And I was asked recently, what's the one piece of advice you would give? And the answer is try and adopt a growth mindset. That's it. Because if you do that, it means you're going to try and become a more a little of a learner than not a learner, more of a person who experiments than not experiments, and more promiscuous, and asking people questions, what have you done differently in the last month that's helped you in your life? Like I think the answer to your question. Um, Everything else can come in behind that.
Yeah, having those foundations there. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. Just want to say a huge thank you for all the top tips and your knowledge that you've shared with us. Before we go, maybe could you just give us a little more of an insight into Pitstop and what men could expect to get from trying out Pitstop, or just a bit more about what exactly you do?
Yeah, Pitstop is an app that fuels men's personal growth, or helps men fuel their growth mindset. The app is available on the app stores. There's a 7-day free trial. Encourage your listeners to take a look, or your female listeners to encourage their dads, their brothers, their partners, their sons to take a look. We also have a podcast called Drive to Thrive, which is sort of a play on Drive to Survive, the TV show. And we regularly host interesting webinars. Last week we did one on ayahuasca, which is an interesting sort of taboo topic that some people are taking to help with personal growth. And in January we'll have a cool webinar on the data about drink. We'll have some interesting speakers talking about non-alcoholic drinks and things like that, and data about that. So, generally what we're really authentically trying to do is help men become better men, the best versions of themselves, adopt personal growth. And that's not a zero-sum game in our view. If we help men, we're going to help the entire society. It'll help women and children. And there are lots of apps and other businesses helping women, but none today helping men at a holistic level. So I pinch myself when I sort of say that, because it seems so obvious that sort of myself and other men could do with an ally in their pocket to help them become, growth mindset orientated and better people.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I've listened to the podcast myself. Would recommend it. It is great, a great listen. Some good positive noise. So thank you so much for your time today. If people want to find you on LinkedIn, you're on.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Name is Emmett Kilduff, and the website is takeapitstop.com. We're trying to encourage men to literally take a pit stop and step back and reflect on one's life.
Okay. Key message from today: take a pit stop. Take time to reflect, whether you're male or female, on your life, so that you have no regrets later on. Prioritize your health and well-being. Thank you so much, Emmett.
Thank you, Anna. Enjoyed it.
So before you stop listening, I want you to pause. What did you take away from the podcast today? What small steps will you start? And what did you hear that you know could help someone else to make small steps to lead their health, well-being, productivity and performance? Please do share this episode and please subscribe to the podcast. And remember that Leap Health are here to provide workplace, health, well-being and performance workshops, one-to-one coaching and bespoke corporate solutions to help the world make small steps to lead health, well-being, productivity and performance. Please do get in touch. It's Anna at leaphealth.co.uk. Have a great day.